Welcome to another episode of B2B Marketing Futures, the podcast for B2B marketers sponsored by Adsact, the B2B ad platform. Today, we are diving into a topic that continues to challenge even the most sophisticated go-to-market teams, sales and marketing alignment. From defining leads to providing pipeline impact, there are still too many friction points between the two functions. In this episode, we'll hear from 4 exceptional marketers who have tackled this challenge from very different angles, from tech to manufacturing to high-growth startups. We'll explore where alignment breaks down, what rituals and frameworks actually work, and how we can shift from finger-pointing to shared outcomes. But before we get into it, I'd love for our guests to quickly introduce themselves. So, Noah, you're the first on my screen. Maybe would you like to give a sentence on yourself?
Thank you for having me on. My name is Noah Thomas. I'm the head of growth marketing at a company called Xpana.
Thank you so much, Noah.
Thanks for having me. My name's Sawsan. I am based out in London. I've been doing all things marketing and demand gen for the last 11 years and currently at HowNow.
Welcome, Susan. Thank you so much. Elisabet.
Hi, I'm Elisabet Digital Marketing Senior Manager at DSM-Firmenich. Thank you for this opportunity.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And Scott.
Hi, I'm Scott Ferguson. I'm head of growth marketing at a company called Pelion in the telco space. I'm helping companies connect IoT devices.
That's great. Thank you so much for those great introductions. So let's start by unpacking the tension. Where do you see the biggest breakdowns in sales and marketing alignment today? Is it unclear handoffs, definition of leads? Let's talk about the real pain points.
I can go. Actually, you mentioned something that it was in my mind because even today, maybe not the biggest, but one big disconnect that I still see is the lead definition and the follow-up expectations. In marketing in general, we qualify leads based on engagement, but the sales organization may expect more ready to buy contact, no? And when this misalignment is sustained over time, it can really erode the relationship, the business relationship. For me, it's very important that we agree as an organization in these definitions early in the process when you are creating the business flow and when you are creating the business process.
I'd agree with that. I think that there's 3 levels for me. First of all, what is the business trying to achieve? And is the strategy aligned so both marketing and sales know what they're trying to go after? Then there's the KPI part, which then feeds what is a good lead, what is a qualified lead. And then there's the other piece below that, which is actually, do you have the in-house capabilities to derive that success? And so yeah, for me, very similar to what Elisabet, you said, it's like how actually our marketing working on the same thing sales are working on. Are we going for the same goal? Just that very first, what's a North Star? And for every company, it's usually different. But yeah, getting that defined and clear amongst the teams really helps. So you don't have one team celebrating while the other team's losing and etc.
And have you found, Scott, that aligning on good quality leads is like the most challenging thing, or is it aligning on pipeline, or I don't know?
Well, yeah, it can be both, right? So I think it can be really challenging if you don't get it defined early. Because then you end up with a bit of back and forth for however long until you eventually do get it defined. And I think the most important thing is working closely with sales, with your go-to-market strategy. For me personally, and where I've been, there's 2 things that we're really focused on. So one is what is a high intent lead and defining that with sales. So for me, where we are here is that's a hand raiser. That is somebody who's done something that sales will care about and will drive sales to act on it. And the second side of it is actually being clear with sales that I'm not going to give you all the other stuff because I don't think it's ready for you. Or I don't want to drown you with stuff that you're going to eventually go, hey, that's wasting my time. So actually in doing that and having the quality stuff go with sales and working towards what those quality metrics are and having a clear definition of them means that they value the input that marketing have versus thinking, hey, they're just creating a lot of noise. And I think that makes a massive difference. Because then sales feel like you're working with them or for them, not against them. And that's the key thing for me. Wherever I've been, I think that's been the main thing, is actually helping sales understand that what is it you want? What is it we can get for you that's going to matter? And how do we get that in your hands more frequently?
I would definitely agree with that, Scott. So I have a slightly different view on it because I've come from a sales background and then come back into marketing. So I've seen both sides of it. And I think one of the things that I've seen a breakdown between sales and marketing is the lack of empathy. So when I was in sales, I remember thinking, oh, marketing never help us get like good leads. Like they just doing like all fun, cutesy things, but it doesn't really have an impact on me. I'm still having to outbound hard. And then on the other side of things, when I've been in marketing, I remember thinking, we're doing all these webinars and events for you. Why are you not getting people to sign up? So I think just a lack of empathy both ways sometimes is where that breakdown occurs. But when you start to realize why you're doing these things and it's actually you're both working towards one goal, you shouldn't be working together. So if you're celebrating and the other one's losing, that business has definitely got fundamental problems they need to sort out. But then in addition to the empathy piece, I think the other thing that I've seen, and I've also managed sales teams as well, is that the teams use different technologies. So that in itself creates silos. So for example, sales teams might be using Outreach or Salesloft, or they might be sending out emails outside of your CRM. They might just be doing it on personal. They might be using LinkedIn, in which case you don't have visibility. They might be using Sales Navigator. There are so many different ways that they might be reaching out to prospects, which you may not have visibility of. And vice versa, marketing has lots of different tools that sales necessarily don't have access to. So even that, I think, creates a little bit of a breakdown in communication. One of the things that I always suggest for companies to do is try and consolidate as much of it in the CRM, so you have a clear line of sight as to what's happening and what's progressing, who's influencing what. And then it feels more like a shared effort than you do your thing over there, we do our thing over here. We kind of hope it all works out. And it just becomes more of a streamlined process.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think one of the big things that I've seen in the different small businesses that I've had the pleasure of working in has been the breakdown in data silos, like you're saying, with these different systems. The misalignment sometimes happens between sales and marketing, where maybe we do agree on an MQL definition, or we do agree on a lead score definition of a high intent or warm lead. And then once it goes over to sales, the immediate question is, okay, well, what did they do to achieve this, right? And even though we might have a very clear lead scoring model and we might have very clear MQL definitions, the underlying activity of it influences oftentimes the outreach, right? And also the outcomes, how well that lead's actually followed up with, how well and proficiently we actually land that customer in the end. And then, we also see the breakdowns too, I think a lot of times in content, where marketing will produce something like a webinar that could be used in that outbounding asset. And a lot of times as marketers, the hard thing that I have to remind myself of constantly is, how am I going to make this an outbound asset afterwards? And not only just create the inbound assets, but make sure I'm reaching across the aisle to help make some of the assets that we produce in our department to be useful for sales, and understand and describe those things when we hand it over. Hey, this video that we're putting out on this blog is really useful. It's useful to this type of market segment. Here's some cadences that we feel like would be really helpful for these to be in, right?
I think just to build on that as well, like getting the input into that content from sales is another great way of getting alignment, right? It's like, what are you hearing in the market that you feel you don't have collateral on, or things to enable you to sell better? Having that feedback loop that comes back in. So like I've done a lot of work here and in other places where we're trying to close that loop, which is actually, can we hear the sales calls to hear the stuff that they're saying that we know we got content gaps on? Feedback to us the things that you think we need to be better messaging on, so that we can put those into your prospecting sequences, into the content that you've got. And even before we even start the content, like this happened this week, which is like, hey, we've got that lovely new ebook. It's great, but where's it going and why do we have it? Should all be well defined before we ever wrote a word on the piece of paper, and actually making sure the sales are fully aware of what's coming as well, so they can plan their prospecting around that, or maybe hold back until they have this asset that might help them get a foot in the door. So it's that communication internally around those pieces of tentpole pieces of content that you're investing money in, potentially, that's going to have a longer shelf life than 2 days or a social post that week. That's the way to actually maximize not just that alignment, but get the value out of that content as well that you're putting out there.
Yeah, I use the sales loop feedback for my content strategy, and I think that seems to be a powerful one, because without it, I think marketers like stab in the dark to try and find the topics that they think will be relevant rather than what actually is relevant. But then just building on that further, in the past I've used tools like Gong, which records calls. And actually for marketers, we used to have like listening parties and listen to the actual terms and phrases used, because we know if we use those exact phrases, that's probably what the ICP are going to be searching for. So rather than trying to use our language, we use the ICP's language from the sales calls. And that's when sales usually are more encouraged to use the content that we produce, because they see it actually addressing the questions in the language of the ICP, versus marketing just trying to put their language out and their message in their tone.
It's definitely reverse engineering, no? So it's not about how marketing places the product or the services, is which are the customer pain points, and what is the sales language, how does it look like, and use that language, right? And also in terms of empathy, right? You said something that it's completely correct. I've not been in sales, but I have completely empathy. I think that sales is a very difficult job, and I totally understand when they decide not to invest their own time, and not following up certain leads that are handed to them. However, one solution or one tactic that we have been using is providing extra context in those lists. Okay, why you are qualifying an MQL or an SQL? What's the reason? Extra context. What has been exactly the engagement that has made us decide that this is an SQL? In my experience, has helped a lot, because they can then empathize with us. They see the reason, and understanding is actually being the ultimate solution to trigger execution.
I love that idea, Elisabet. And also, I can imagine how that forces marketing to do a good job, right? Because you need to justify what you're doing. You need to be very clear on your processes and everything. So whatever, if you're giving a lead score or moving leads through the funnel, you need to be super clear of what you're doing, because you are forcing yourself to communicate that with the rest of the teams. I think that's a great idea.
I think there's a lot of chat there as well about the fact that it's a lead. One of the things that sometimes we lose sight of as marketers actually is that we look at the end goal, close on revenue, pipeline, a lead. Actually, just enabling sales to have a conversation with a target account is a win. And actually making sure we're in front of those target accounts is equally as important. For me, actually sharing with the team and working with the team to go, hey, we've got your audience in these channels. We're in front of that audience. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we're trying to achieve with this campaign, and being really clear and aligned on that this isn't an SQL yet. This isn't a high-end lead. This is an opportunity. This is an opportunity, though, for you to chat with that account and be in front of them. And what we do here is we try and add these touch points together. So it might be a convo ad on LinkedIn that they converted on, but there's a trade show that we know they're visiting, so we'll also be there. And we use these not as single siloed events. We will report on them singly because we have to, but we also treat them as touch points on a journey to build that relationship with whoever we're trying to sell to. So it's not a one and done approach with sales. So there's not that didn't work, we're not trusting marketing again. It's that clarity of that this is a long-term game to get in front and build that demand within accounts, and it isn't going to happen with one piece of collateral, one activity. It needs more than that, and I think actually I found success when sales and marketing understand that there's not a silver bullet to driving success. It's got to be hard graft on both sides, aligned and constant communication and working together to build a program that actually fits all parties. So you achieve that common goal at the very top. Otherwise, you just end up being headless chicken sometimes, doing a lot of work that isn't helping anyone.
Scott, you raised such a good point about getting the sales team in front of the account and not describing it as a lead. Actually, it's been years since I've been tracking leads, because we don't track leads anymore. The buying journey in B2B, at least, is not a single individual. It is a team of people, and you might influence the influencer, you might influence the decision maker, the budget holder. And so for us, certainly the company I'm at now and the places I've been more recently, we are looking at the opportunities that have been generated within accounts rather than, hey, we got a lead. Because again, leads have different qualities, different scores, different intent levels. And so when we're actually both working towards opportunities around a specific either account list or around a specific ICP, then sales and marketing have that common language, and it becomes a little bit more black and white who's doing what, to try and get them there. So from marketing, we're providing the air cover and the ability to reach them in a really quick and efficient way. And then when sales swoop in and have those conversations, there's already that awareness there of who that company is, what they do. There might have already been engagement with some content as well to make that conversation easier. But without that piece of marketing that happened beforehand, that sales conversation might not have been as easy or as productive.
Yeah, and I think it as well, if you're in a fortunate position where if you come into a business new and you've got that opportunity to explain to whoever the senior leadership are where you're going, and you can paint that picture of this is how we want to work. We don't want to count leads. We need to count what matters. What matters is high intent, pipeline, speed of closing revenue. If you can get that win at that level to then have the buy-in down below, then you can get to that position where it's like, I'm not counting leads. And then actually, so we had the sales meeting today. We don't count leads. We review the high intent ones and we wonder where they are, what's going on, because we all know that we have a conversion rate. We want to get those into pipeline and then pipeline into close one. So we're looking at the quality activity. We're not wasting our time essentially looking at lead numbers. So it drives the right behavior as well, right? We don't then go off doing activities such as content syndication as a result. We don't go buy lists. We don't need to do any of that noisy stuff because we know it doesn't pan out with the numbers that we need it to. In the end, it will drop off. So I know I'm in a fortunate position because not every marketer has the luxury of that, and I feel for those that don't. But when you can get in that position, the difference is night and day. Because I've been on both sides of that as well.
Yeah, and Noah, in our briefing call, you mentioned that you use project management tools for foster alignment. I'm keen to hear how those tools are actually aligning the organization on the projects and driving sales and marketing alignment.
Yeah, we try to give everyone access to what the team is working on. So providing like total clarity into the different activities of even my ICs that are on my team, just so that sales has a good idea of, again, like a real-time response to what's going out to their market. When you're covering a wide swath of markets and you're kind of looking at several industries all at once, having that visibility and that level of clarity for the teams, I think is really helpful and important past just an iframe of what's happening in HubSpot or an events log in Salesforce where they can see kind of the task and the checkoffs. And then we try and produce, to the best of our ability, advanced planning where we can show this is what we're doing, this is what's on the roadmap, this is how it will help supply your sales pipeline. I think it varies organization to organization. In this particular stop, this business has been around for over 140 years. So there's lots of opinions and preformed processes and some of those interesting things that are starting to change. But it's also a disruptive business in that it's a data first kind of acquisition that's happened. So it's a merging of the two, the old school and the new school at this particular place that I'm at. And something that we found success when trying to change people's behavior, which is hard, whether it's sales behavior or marketing behavior, and also trying to influence new behavior that positively influences pipeline, like getting away from leads and stop focusing on MQL generation, has just been trying to give people as much clarity as possible so they can ask questions and try to foster a alignment where everybody's kind of comfortable in a flat management structure, coming and having a conversation. Hey, I see you're doing X campaign. Have you thought about Y idea on this, right? Or I see in the project management tool that we use, Monday, I see in Monday that you're working with this contractor on this type of ad set. Have you thought about using this type of USP or this type of language that we typically use? And then we try to align these things with data and reports in our reporting structure so that people understand where we source this information from. And they also goes as a back communication channel to sales is, hey, if you update this, marketing will actually take this feedback and use it dynamically where we can. So close lost reasons in Salesforce, next step notes, all of those kind of things help influence the models to try to grow faster.
Amazing experience, Noah. So let's step back for a second and let's talk about if you could fix just one thing about the sales and marketing relationship based on your current or past experience, what would it be? Think of this as your magic thing?
I've got one thing. I don't know if it's a fix or what, or maybe it's just a different way of maybe doing it. I think one of the things that would benefit is, this is a bit crazy idea, right? But maybe we, as a function, we don't call them two separate functions. We call them a go-to-market function, and people sit within that, right? And I think because basically what you are is two teams that are working on a go-to-market motions and working almost in a stream. That probably doesn't work for every business. Say marketers always want to be marketers, and salespeople sure as heck won't want to be anything other than a salesperson. But at the same time, right, having that awareness of you're not siloed teams and you are working together on one thing. I think that's one thing that where there's ever been struggle around getting alignment is that recognition that you're both trying to achieve the same thing, guys. You're to help each other out. Rather than, no, we're off doing our own thing, we're doing our own thing, we're two separate. These worlds shall not meet. Sit at different dinner tables, whatever have you, right? Wear different uniforms. But yeah, I think that for me is one thing, if I wish I could ever change it, that would be the one change. Because when you can eradicate that silo, you can move forward so much faster.
Actually, in that same note, one thing that if I had, the magic wand, one thing that I would like to change is this collective mindset where sales owns the conversion and marketing owns the awareness, and that's it. And I think that this is outdated. Marketing has influence far down the funnel, and we marketeers, we are, and we should be, and we can be revenue generators. And sales, in my opinion, should be feeding the funnel earlier. If we know about their feedback at an awareness stage, we can then create those messages, right, that really resonate with our audiences. So if I could change that, is that mindset. And to your point, yes to that, yes to be the revenue team together, the customer journey, owning together unified KPIs, and don't getting distracted by territorial debates, and grow together to achieve our business goals.
Yeah, I just quickly, I think that's a really good point. And the fact that so many marketing functions are capped at the minute they get a lead in, right? And then sales take over the pipeline part of it. And the reality is that marketing needs to build that demand with sales to get it in the pipeline, and marketing should be helping sales to accelerate that through the pipeline. And then when it's a customer, it should be helping retain it and grow it, right? It's the full life cycle. It's simple. We all know it. It just doesn't happen in every business, of course, right? But it's helping, a lot of the times, actually helping businesses understand what marketing value could be delivered, and helping the business understand that marketing isn't a cost either. It's an investment to drive revenue, as the same as sales are. Right, and working together can maximize that investment return. So yeah, it's a really good point.
Yeah, that kind of, I think, segues perfectly into the thing that I thought about when these questions got sent over, which was one thing that I would really like to see is for marketers to quit focusing so much on ROAS and start pivot away from channel analysis to try to look at what's our LTV, what's our actual return, how long are we retaining these customers, what's the influence journey. I think oftentimes, we're all growth marketers on this call, so we get naturally sucked into the new business side, I think, a lot, and the net new logos and landing that. But, looking past all of that, what value we're creating when we're bringing those customers in, and then how that awareness, the building of the brand, the introduction into the brand, that first conversation. We all know what the experts say about first impressions, but a lot of times that first impression that customer gets ends up lasting them for 5 or 10 years as stakeholders change in and out, because it makes such an impact on the organization. And while we have product marketers and we have other folks on our teams that help assist us and kind of tell those stories of our customers, I think a lot of times we get hung up in looking at ROAS and looking at how much money did we spend and how much return did we get and direct ROI, when the harder question to answer is really how much overall are we generating for the business on a lifetime value, and what does that business perceive us as? How do they actually see our product or a service or a solution in their actual partnership? And that's something that I've tried to work harder on and focus on more in my career as time goes on, is how can I better set this up in the beginning, right? From a net new logo standpoint, and then how can I follow through it in the funnel, like you said, Scott?
Yeah, I've just got to share something I said with my team earlier today was if success is us building demand, and to do that we need to build a brand that builds demand, and then 90% of a brand is perception, then you've got to do a lot of the stuff that doesn't scale and probably doesn't have a direct ROAS or attribution, right? And I think that's not just a sales and marketing thing at all. Obviously, that's finance and other teams and helping them have that understanding that, yeah, we can do that and we might get something from it and we might be able to attribute it, but actually it's not always going to work that way. And actually, possibly the most successful things we do are the things that we aren't scalable, aren't reportable directly, right, to the bottom line. I mean, it's getting comfortable with that as well inside the business, that marketing's doing the right things because the general tide is positive, and we're seeing the right noises, rather than getting bogged down. Like I am a stickler. I know it's not an attribution podcast by any stretch. We need about 5 hours to cover that topic. Mm-hmm. But like I've been quite fortunate here not to get involved in that. And actually, I've taken the stance that if attribution comes up as a sticking point in a sales and marketing conversation, you can have it. I'm really not bothered because that's a result for the business. And if it's positive and we're doing more of that, you can claim all those all you want. It doesn't really matter because I'm not going to sit in a board meeting or an exec meeting anywhere and say, no, there was 50,000 touches and they didn't click our ads on LinkedIn or they did go to this event here. It doesn't really matter. What matters to the business is we got that positive result. And that's what we should celebrate. And whoever gets it doesn't really matter. The business as a combo achieved that. So yeah, sorry. Hopefully that's all we say on attribution. And that'd be the end of it.
That was it. But Scott, I wanted to touch on that. I'm actually really glad attribution came up because I think that's actually one of the things that helps build that empathy both ways, but also see the impacts of both teams. So a lot of times I see and I hear a lot of companies saying the same thing is, we got that lead. No, we got that lead. And people fight over who got whichever lead. But attribution is such an interesting topic because there is no one thing. And you might think, oh, this came direct from organic sources. But what you might not know is that lead before doing that might have got a recommendation from a friend or might have seen a review site or something else that you haven't been able to track somewhere along the way. But one thing that I've started doing a lot is when we get some of these opportunities come through and I see them progressing, sometimes I do look back and see what were the different touch points that we were able to track just to see what is having an influence. Because if we're just talking about what generated the lead or what generated the meeting or what generated the opportunity, then you will have a very skewed view of what is driving and what is influencing. And I've seen companies make the mistake of assuming something doesn't influence because it doesn't drive. And then they switch it off and then suddenly they're not driving as much and they wonder why. It's because they've switched off the channels that influence. So it becomes a bit of a sticky subject. And I think attribution is just going to get more and more interesting as time goes on. But I've seen a lot of companies also move away from attribution. They do still need to report on what is delivering, but they are starting to take into account that not everything is trackable. And so they are giving things a bit more time to play out. But I do think that's a really interesting conversation because, again, one of the things that I would like to change is the blame game, which sometimes happens. And I've seen this overcome really successfully when you put sales and marketing in a room together to brainstorm before something happens. So for example, if you've got a big conference coming up, getting them together to share ideas of what would be a cool stand, what could be cool giveaways, what could be a cool game or incentive or follow-up, and you map that out together, and then marketing will go ahead and plan that event, bring all these ideas to life if they're feasible. And then just before the event, we do a team briefing about, right, here's the roles, responsibilities, expectations, here's what the follow-up's going to look like, and have that already in advance so that on the day, sales feel super comfortable to do what they do best and knowing that afterwards they're going to take the ones that they've got meetings with, and then everyone else is going to be left to marketing to nurture and warm up so that they become hand raisers as well. And I think that's when you really get a united GTM function.
100%. All right. So we've covered a lot today, from empathy, shared planning, tech limitations, the role of sales enablement. And well, I want to say thank you so much for joining today's conversation. And to all the ones listening, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with your marketing and sales peers. And until next time, this has been B2B Marketing Futures.